Okay, in terms of the Biscuit fire, which burned in 2002, it became a flashpoint for the debate on what to do with landscapes, large landscapes that have been burned by a fire. And there were two views at the time that were being discussed. One was that the fire was catastrophic. It burned 500,000 acres. It moonscaped the region, which is totally false. And as soon as that area as soon as the fire had diminished, plant recovery was rapid. There were conifer seedlings that were springing up literally from the ashes. So the second view was that these systems are perfectly capable of coming back on their own. That's the way nature designed this region. Why it's so biologically diverse is because of the interplay between geology and natural processes like fire. And these forests are joined at the hip by the process of fire. It joins life and death in the forest. Fire is a rejuvenating process. It's not catastrophic from an ecological standpoint. And what we learned from 5 years of work on the ground is that indeed that second view is really what's happening on the landscape. It's not a catastrophe, it's not a moonscape, but it's a biological tapestry of life that's in different stages of rejuvenating itself from a very beneficial, ecologically beneficial fire. Well, in terms of how the federal government responded to the Biscuit, it pretty much gobbled up the catastrophe theory and ran with it and proposed a totally inappropriate and scientifically incredulous approach, which was, we've got a disaster and we're going to respond with post-fire logging, and that's going to be recovery. And I think that as a result of the years of studies that have come out since the Biscuit fire on the impacts of post-fire logging, even the Forest Service changed its tune. It's no longer describing post-fire logging as recovery. It's only talking about it now as economics. And that's because there have been a number of studies that have shown that as a result of post-fire logging, there have been a number of conifers that were coming back on their own that were killed by the logging operations. These conifer seedlings were smashed by logs that were fallen by the logging operations and then dragged upslope, killed a lot of the seedlings that were coming back on their own. The Forest Service had claimed that they needed to log the forest to save it, to replant it. But in fact, what happened was by logging that forest, they killed the seedlings, they damaged the soils, they left slash on the ground, which increases the risk of a severe fire next time around, and they did nothing to promote recovery. They left long-term scars on that landscape. And that is not ecological recovery, it's ecological damage. The Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument is one of our newest national monuments. It was designated by President Clinton in June of 2000, and it was one of the first nations, or one of the nation's first, monument to biodiversity. It truly is an extraordinary example of the biodiversity of the Klamath-Siskiyou ecoregion. There are lots of rare plants in the 53,000-acre monument. It's got some unique fish species that are found only in our region, extraordinary butterfly populations, some of the richest butterfly diversity of any place in Western North America, and it's a mixing zone for species from distant lands. We've got examples of plants from the Great Basin, which is much further to our east, from the Shasta Valley in the south, from the Coast Range to the west, and from the Cascades to the north. They all kind of mix and match and merge in the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. Now, when the President designated the monument, he put together a proclamation that stated its importance and how it was to be managed in general to protect the area's unique biodiversity. The President's proclamation also stated that if grazing is found to be incompatible with protecting the monument's unique biological diversity, then the Bureau of Land Management, which oversees the monument, needs to retire the grazing leases. And since then, there have been a series of field studies that have been going on in the monument. studies that have been done by the Bureau of Land Management and studies that were done by the National Center for Conservation Science and Policy, which included a team of specialists that have been on the ground combing through that landscape for the past 3 years. Those studies are now in their final completion. They're out for scientific peer review, and I think the general conclusion from those studies is that cattle have been adversely impacting the monument's unique biological diversity, and the National Center will be presenting those results to the BLM very soon, and we will be requesting that the BLM retire the grazing leases and truly protect that monument for its unique biodiversity.